Hey everyone, it's Ryan Landau from Purpose Jobs. I'm pumped to have you join us for our video series, Finding Balance. Work-life balance continues to rank as a top priority for job seekers. So I'm sitting down with some friends to talk about how they balance work, life, and everything else going on. I hope you're a little inspired from today's episode. Enjoy. Adam, thank you so much for joining our video series, Finding Balance. Do you mind just kicking us off and introducing who is Adam, Keyplay's family, all of the above?
Sure. What am I? Who am I? I don't know. Uh, I'm a above average golfer, a dad, entrepreneur, um, and building a company right now called Keyplay. And we help businesses with sales team pick the right accounts and work the right accounts. And we also have a part of that is a website, puresignal.org, where we publish research. And so we have kind of like a media company within our software company too. And all of this is very, very early stage. It's just about almost coming up on a year since we incorporated.
Makes sense. You just named a few interesting things. You said golf, dad, business person, so on and so forth. If you had to prioritize, so like all of those things, and like someone were to ask you, like, what are the big pillars of like Adam's life? Like, how would you prioritize that?
Mm. I try not to prioritize them because I think of it more like an integrated system where like they should feed each other, and like engagement and feeling like I'm doing my best work with my business should make me better at home. And if I'm engaged enough at home, I should be better at work. And if I'm taking care of myself, getting outside and exercising and doing those kinds of things, that should sort of feed. So I think about it more like an integrated system than different separate things that I have to trade off between. And that might be a little bit of motivated reasoning because I want to I want to strive, and I like to work hard, and I like to spend a lot of time on building my company. So at least that's the way I choose to think about it.
Interesting. And I think that's super interesting because most of the people that I talk to, it's like priority number one is this, priority number two, versus like thinking about it, vertically, or thinking about it more like horizontally, which is interesting to think about. Has your thought process on that like evolved, one, just over time as you have gotten older and entered into like a new like stage of life, and then two is like as you've developed a few companies, like culturally, are you trying to set the tone the same from company one to now, or has like culture evolved?
That's a great question. I think my thinking has evolved because my environment has evolved, right? Like I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old now. So I remember back when I was building Simply Measured, I had my first kid during that. That was a company I started back in like 2010. So, but I started it as a, late 20s, early 30s, no kids, married situation, versus now like I'm starting this company with young kids. So that's different. That's a big difference. And then in terms of how I set the tone, I mean, I think I am a little bit more mindful of like trying to now like make sure people create the space to do things with family or deal with, you know, we just had somebody who had a death within their social circle, and she had to kind of miss some work. And I try to just be like, yeah, like long-term view on this stuff, right? If we have a person that's key to the company, to not optimize too much in the short term on their output and more think about like letting them have the space to do the things they need to do when they come up, and just make sure that I'm kind of like role modeling that as much as I can.
Yeah, interesting. And because I think you have such an interesting story from like starting like a few different companies, and this is not your first rodeo. Like, how would you also measure success at this company? And is that how you measured success at maybe like the first company you started? I'm just curious of like your evolution and your thought process around
Yeah,
like defining success.
I think right now my mindset is just about enduring, like trying to go the farthest, not run the fastest or be the biggest. So I think my main motivation is to build something that lasts. And I think that's the biggest evolution I've had in thinking versus is kind of like get a win or go fast or grow, or like obviously we need to be focused on growth. But I think I'm trying to take as long of a time horizon that I can to think about it and just say, okay, well, if we survive and if we can endure, like we're going to have something, right? That's the ultimate test. And so it's trying to think about things in that frame, right? Like how do we make this something that's going to last in 20 years, 30 years?
Yeah, interesting. And I imagine that probably changes like your thinking on like day to day like decisions, or like no change at all.
Definitely, right? Definitely. Like it should, if we're doing it right. It should mean that we're trading short-term quick wins for investments into long-term. Obviously, we have to find ways to grow now and hit our goals this quarter, but I think we want to try to overall have a mindset toward, what's going to make this last? What's going to build a moat? What's going to have like compounding value or open new options for us in the future? And that we can like start to just slowly move forward on today.
Yep. And then growing the company, just curious, like, right, there's only a couple ways to grow from a financing perspective. Like, you can finance the company through customers and revenue. You can finance it through a bank. You can finance it through raising money. Curious, and how are you growing Keyplays today? And however you're doing that, are they aligned with this strategy too? And was that an important conversation, or maybe not at all?
Yeah, it was an important conversation because two companies ago, I started a company that raised a lot of venture capital. At least at the time, we had raised 30 million. In 2021, it got a little distorted, but then my next company after that, I decided not to raise venture capital because I thought we raised too much, and I thought some of the root cause of our problems was raising too much at too high of a price and getting over our skis. So I did a fully bootstrapped company that ultimately ended up selling. And so this time it was like, well, am I a bootstrapper or a venture person? It's like a little bit wrapped up in the identity. Like, am I one of these things or the other? I think about it pretty pragmatically. It's like, what's the product and the market and the customer that you're going after? And then sort of trying to fit the capital model to that. And in the market we're in, it's like, there's a clear need, but there's like a lot of competitors. It's big. So I thought we would need some venture financing to make this business work. So we raised a $3 million seed to get started. I don't know like what the next steps will look like. I want to try to get us at least to be able to control our destiny in terms of profitability. But I suspect that if we really want to grow and if we really want to take a big swing, we'll probably be looking to like raise more money in the future from the outside.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think people sometimes have this like identity crisis. It's like, hey, I am going to raise as much money as possible, grow at all costs, or I'm like
Right.
a bootstrapper and this is just going to be like a lifestyle business. Versus what you're talking about, right? There is a middle ground. It's like raising money, but like just growing responsibly, and having a real use of the funds rather than just like hoping for the best. Let's spend and see what and see
For
what
sure.
happens.
I don't think that mindset is flying anymore for sure. I think there was a little brief moment there where it was this growth at all costs was fine and people would sign up for that, but I don't think we're seeing that anymore. I think it's more kind of back to basic principles that you read in Buffett and Munger, and yeah, like you use outside capital to grow, and like if you're going after a big market, but you don't just do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I've definitely have read like a few stories about companies starting, whether it's like the MailChimps, like the Basecamps of the world, which have like raised nothing. But then there's also this like middle group of companies, which is like I'm trying to think who's the most notable, like a Zapier or something like that, right? They raised two, three, $4 million. I'm not sure of the exact amount of money, but now they run like an extremely profitable business and
Right.
maybe have not raised any money since then. So I think there's an interesting camp somewhere in the middle there.
For sure. Yeah. I think you can
Question.
do different versions. There's so many different versions of that, right? And you can change states over time, right? Like I think some of these companies that started Bootstrap then raised really big growth rounds when they're at 10 or 20 million of revenue, and it's like then they kind of got on to the venture path. So I think yeah, you have more options than maybe it seems like if you're just reading TechCrunch.
Yeah. But back to Adam for a second, like as you're growing these companies, is there any like moments in time you're like, shit, like I feel like super out of balance. Either I'm working too hard or I'm spending too much time with family, or I just feel super mentally or physically out of shape. And like, have you had that feeling? And then like, what do you do to autocorrect to like get back into the place where you feel more quote unquote balanced?
Oh yeah, I have. I try to avoid it by just having some consistent habits that I do around like waking up early, having my little alone time to kind of write in my journal and read, exercising. That's kind of like what I do before I start the day. And so that I think really helps as an anchor. But then I definitely, there's times I'm slipping on my sleep quality or amount, or I'm like working more on the weekend than I kind of intended to, and maybe compromising a little bit more on my engagement with the family that I don't want. And so I just, what I just try to check it and then just return to the systems that I know work, because I don't find that I can just like overpower it. I find I need like a system, which is like, like rules, like hard heuristics that are like, I won't work from 5 p.m. on Friday until, 9 a.m. on Sunday or something, right? And it's just that. Or my phone goes out of my pocket and onto my desk at this time, and it doesn't come back into my possession until the kids are in bed. So I find that like returning to systems has been the most useful tool for me when I find that I get a little off, or I'm like kind of off kilter in one way or the other.
Yeah, so interesting on the phone note. I recently did two things. One, my phone no longer is invited into the bedroom.
Hmm.
So like it's just one not going in there, and two is like all notifications are just turned off on my phone. So I have to take an action if I want to go check something rather than it just like pushing to me. So yeah, I
Those
think
are
the
good
phone is such
ones.
a driver that
I do
yeah.
similar. I get the notifications from text, but nothing else. And then it doesn't come into the bedroom. I have an old school alarm clock that wakes me up. I don't use the phone just to avoid that like temptation. But you know what? I still like break all my rules. Like I still open it up and check, Slack and LinkedIn. Even though they're not giving me notifications, I still go look at them.
Yeah, sometimes you got to break the rules, but on the alarm clock side, I use the same one. I've gotten just a touch fancier, and instead of hearing like that super annoying alarm, I have like a light thing that like wakes me up. So,
Oh, nice.
but yeah,
Way to
doing the
go.
doing the old doing the old school thing. I guess going back to like these systems for a second, because I think people are always interested in this, like day in a life of like Adam. Like if we can get like more specific around that, like what time are you waking up in the morning? What time are you journaling, working out, having your first cup of coffee? Like what does the day in the life look like?
I'm somewhat embarrassed of it because it sounds like such a tech bro who like listens to Tim Ferriss kind of a morning, but whatever. I do it because it does work for me. I don't think this works for everybody. Like I think the
Yeah.
key to this is finding your own, like what works with your rhythms. But I am a morning person, so I usually wake up 5:30 to 5:45. Um, and then first thing I do is I get out my journal and have a cup of coffee. I love that first cup of coffee. The first sip on the first cup of coffee is like the most magical morning. And I kind of just unload some whatever's in my brain, whatever's been kind of percolating overnight. And then I usually have a book. Like it's this is weirdly specific, but I always read nonfiction in the morning. If I'm reading fiction, I read it at night. So I'm usually reading a biography or sometimes a business book, usually a biography lately. And I maybe, crack that open and read until I'm sort of done with my coffee. And then I work out at home. So I just kind of have home workout equipment that I use and get my workout, get ready. And then by about, between 8 and 8:30, I'm like kind of at my desk ready to tackle whatever's going to come up. And sometimes I have a good plan of what I'm going to focus on, and sometimes I'm super reactive. I try to like time block my calendar and figure out ways to like manage that. But I'd say, that works for me probably about half the time.
Cool, makes sense. And then in the morning, just out of curiosity, what time do kids get up and like are they entering the
Oh,
Adam picture then or like
yeah, I usually get probably on average 30 minutes of quiet with the book or in the coffee, and then it's like between 6:15 and 6:30. I usually have my son's up. My daughter's a little better sleeper, but my son usually kind of comes and gives me a hug, and that's always a nice part of the day too. And but he'll kind of do his thing, like maybe do some chess puzzles or has like an activity to do. On weekends, I do kind of the same thing, except then when the kids are up, I make breakfast, which is something that I do pretty regularly and enjoy. Pancakes
cool.
are the go-to.
What kind of pancakes?
I do like the thin ones. I don't know what kind you like. I do the thin ones, and then they kind of like roll it up with some chocolate chips or some jam. They're sort of like they're called Swedish pancakes. So they come out kind of like bigger and thin. They're really tasty. A lot of butter is good on there, some syrup or some jam.
Mm. Yeah, love all of the above. Yeah, we're a banana chocolate chip kind of home
Oh,
on Sunday morning with
amazing,
pancakes. So
amazing.
yeah, that's the jam. But yeah, it's so interesting, like the 5:30 thing in the morning. Like I don't know if I want to be a 5:30 a.m. person, but I am now. Specifically now, just like having two kids. If I want to have time to myself, which I kind of just feel like I physically and mentally need, it's like the only time of the day that you can
Yeah,
get it.
how
Uh,
that's what I realized. I think, yeah, 10 years ago or so when my kids were young, I kind of figured that out. Oh, this is really the only protected time.
Yeah, so interesting and cool. I guess, now that we're in like 2023 right now, and if someone had to look at like pure signal, key plays and stuff like that, where are we now? And like, even just over the next 6, 8 months, like where are we going for the rest of this year
With the business.
with the business, correct?
Yeah, I mean we're in that early stage where we were in like design partner mode where people that was like pre-launch, nobody knew about us, but we had a handful of customers who were paying and using the product and getting value, had some great proof points. And then in December we like announced Keyplay, announced our funding, so we kind of got out there in a more meaningful way. And now we're just in that like early kind of traction, like signing up new customers each month, iterating on the product, trying to find like where we are in that product market fit spectrum of like, is it really locked in, or are we kind of searching for it? So I think we're in this what we consider early access, and I think by the end of this year, I hope we'll be kind of general availability where we feel really good, and it's like, and we're not limiting, who can use and buy, and we're kind of like getting into growth mode next year is how where I'd like to be. I think it's a challenging market right now. I think we want to remain patient and kind of keep that long term view, right, and just not get too distracted by like the month over month, like what's going on in the market, but just kind of focus on like what's going to create value for the long term.
Yeah, I think from today to like earlier where I was in my career, the one thing that I learned and still learning is the P word that you just talked about is like patience. Because sometimes I find it to just be like so challenging. Like you want to
Yeah,
see those results like overnight, but like that just never happens. Everything just takes time. So if you're going to invest in it, it's not like, all right, I'm going to invest in this marketing program. Does it work tomorrow? No, it's like you got to invest in something and really hold on to it. But it's hard to be patient, but like such an important skill.
totally. And it's so hard to measure yourself on the results, but ultimately you have to, right? So I think it's this
Yeah.
balance, right? Like you want and you need results, but at the same time you have to trust the process, trust your intuition, analyze the inputs and not get too obsessed with the outputs, but it's this like painful cycle that you're constantly like going back and forth between those two things.
Cool. I guess, Adam, last question for you. I know I'm a fan. I'm following all the things that you guys are doing. I know other people are following you too. Like, any just like general advice you would give to people like earlier in their career, just thinking about just like finding balance at work, finding balance outside of work, and creating a career that's like sustainable rather than just like burning out. Like, yeah, if you were to look at Adam, let's call it
Mm.
20 years ago, which advice would you give to yourself, like starting your career off?
Mm. Starting my career, I didn't know anything. Um, I maybe I know a little bit now. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of finding things that like you're good at, and that you enjoy, but that other people sort of think are no fun or suck. I think that's like a magical zone, or that are scarce, or other people don't have those skills. So I think trying to find, yeah, those areas where maybe you really think it's great and cool and fun, and other people are kind of like that's boring or sucks. I think that's like a magical zone of skill to develop. Um, I also think that if you can just have a high threshold for embarrassment, that's generally really helpful. So if you're willing to be embarrassed, which I have many, many times, I think you get a lot of leverage out of that because then you'll try and you'll fail and you get like massive amounts of learning. I think those are maybe like some of the, I don't know if they're counterintuitive, but just some of the things that maybe if I could tell myself 20 years ago, I'd probably flag those.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a journey. It's about putting yourself out there, trying things because, right, I think at the end of the day, like you'll regret like not trying something rather than like regret, oh, I tried something and like embarrassed myself. And so
Yeah.
I think that's, yeah, definitely interesting perspective.
Yeah. You mentioned regret. I love the like Jeff Bezos regret minimization framework. I think that's him. I mean, hopefully I'm not misquoting that. But I think that is a good lens is like, yeah, to think about, what you would regret and then do the opposite.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos says it. There, Adam Grant, he also has like a good
Adam
one
Grant
liner
says
of
it too.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, says something about like trying and again, at the end of the day, you'll regret not trying versus like trying and like failing on
Yeah.
something. So yeah, makes sense. Cool, Adam. Really just appreciate you being a good human, and yeah, thanks for all the advice today. Super helpful.
Thanks for having me on.